Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. Mariah's final hours unfolded like agony she could no longer overrun, every step she took with Dominic gripped against her casket echoing with the weight of remorse that had eventually broken her defenses, because for the first time since she committed the insupportable act of tearing the child down from his family, Mariah knew she was wrong, not confused, not justified, not guarding anyone. Wrong in a way that clawed at her casket and stole her breath, and as she fled Genoa City. Under the cover of night, gashes barring down her face while Dominic peeled vocally, she rumored justifications he could no way understand, promising to make it right indeed though she had no idea how, her mind twisting through recollections of Tessa's devastated face, of Sharon's unbelief, of the moment she chose herself over everyone she loved, a choice that now tasted like bane. And when she eventually stopped at the abandoned roadside motel, allowing she could rest, allowing she could plan her coming move, she didn't realize she had formerly been set up, because Ian Ward had been watching, always watching, his shadow stretching across her fate the moment she made her first hopeless move, and when he stepped out of the darkness with that familiar cold smile, Mariah sat, artificially shielding Dominic as dread swamped her modes, her voice pulsing as she confessed everything in a rush. How she no way meant for it to go this far, how she only wanted to cover the child, how fear and preoccupation had twisted her judgment until she couldn't see straight, how she was ready to turn back, to bring Dominic home, to face whatever discipline awaited her, words discovering out in broken heartbreaks as she prayed Ian to let her fix it, to let her undo the damage before it destroyed everyone ever, but Ian didn't come for redemption, he came for control. And in that moment Mariah eventually understood that remorse was a luxury he'd no way allow her. Because Ian Ward didn't believe in alternate chances, only consummations, and as his expression hardened and his hand slipped into his jacket, Mariah's instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move, paralyzed by the intimidating clarity that this was it, that every bad decision had led her then, and when she contended one last time, her voice cracking as she swore she'd surrender, that she'd vanish, that she'd no way speak a word of what she knew, Ian lifted his head nearly sympathetically before uttering the nipping verity that sealed her fate. Loose ends always talk, and the sound of the projectile ripped through the night with brutal futurity, Mariah collapsing to the ground as pain exploded through her casket, the world blurring as Dominic's cries pierced the air, her body pulsing as life drained from her faster than she could comprehend, and as Ian stood over her, cold and unmoved. Mariah's final studies were end of herself but of the people she loved, the family she betrayed, the child she failed, the life she could no way repair, and with her last breath she rumored Dominic's name, her hand shuddering toward him before falling still, leaving Ian Ward to calmly lay up the child, abolish his presence, and evaporate into the darkness as Mariah lay shot and silenced, her remorse implied to the world, her concession buried with her body. And when dawn eventually broke and the verity began to surface, Genoa City would be left reeling from the shock that Mariah's attempt to make effects right had bring her everything, that redemption had been within reach only to be stolen by a single pellet, and as Sharon, Tessa, and the rest of the family would soon learn, Mariah didn't die running from her crime, she failed trying to undo it, leaving behind a heritage of heartache, unanswered questions, and a nipping memorial that in Genoa City, remorse doesn't always come with remission, and occasionally the moment you decide to do the right thing is the moment someone differently decides you'll no way get the chance. The shockwaves from Mariah's death didn't hit Genoa City all at formerly, they crept by like a slow, suffocating fog, starting with the unanswered calls, the growing fear, the concave silence where her voice should have been, because when morning came and Dominic was still gone and Mariah hadn't surfaced, fear turned into dread with intimidating speed, and Sharon felt at first, that bone-deep certainty that commodity was horribly wrong, her mama's suspicion screaming louder than reason as recollections of Mariah's last words replayed in her mind with cruel clarity, every vacillation, every forced smile suddenly feeling like a farewell she hadn't honored in time, while Tessa paced the bottom, oscillating between fury and terror, refusing to believe Mariah would abandon them without a fight, adhering to the idea that she'd come back, that love would win out over fear, not knowing that love had formerly led Mariah straight into Ian Ward's line of fire. And as the hunt boosted, police digging through leads, family members tearing themselves piecemeal with blame, questions mounting up with no answers, Ian moved like a ghost through the fate, Dominic put away securely in his arms, his expression undecipherable as he cancelled every trace of the woman he'd just silenced, because to Ian, Mariah was a tragedy, she was a liability excluded, and yet indeed he could completely overrun the echo of her final concession, her raw remorse. Moping like a stain he could relatively drop down, while back in Genoa City the Verity began to fracture connections at their core, with Sharon replaying every moment she'd tried to advise her son, wondering if a harsher word or tighter grip might have changed the outgrowth, and Tessa twisting into rage-fueled grief, refusing comfort, refusing sense, consumed by the unsupportable knowledge that Mariah had been trying to fix everything when she failed. That she hadn't run because she didn't care but because she watched too important, a consummation that twisted the cutter deeper with every fleeting hour, and when authorities eventually uncovered the abandoned motel room, the scene was like a gut punch, bloodstains hastily gutted but not cancelled, the unmistakable signs of violence speaking louder than any substantiation ever could, and Sharon's legs gave out when the evidence came, the world tipping as the words "she was shot" echoed in her cognizance, because no mama is ever prepared to hear that her child's life ended in terror and pain, alone and hysterical, while Ian Ward's name surfaced like a spectre from the history, transferring a ripple of dread through everyone who flashed back the desolation he'd caused before, the question no bone wanted to ask suddenly insolvable to avoid what if Mariah's remorse made her a target, and as the pieces aligned, the horror strengthened, because Mariah hadn't just been killed, she'd been executed for trying to do the right thing, and the consummation burned a disagreement of wrathfulness that hovered to consume the entire city, with Nick covenanting justice at any cost, Faith demanding answers no bone could give, and Sharon torn between grief and a nipping resoluteness to make sure her son's death was reduced to a citation in Ian Ward's long history of destruction, while Tessa, shattered and furious, clung to Mariah's memory as both a crack and armament, refusing to let the narrative make up her as a villain who got what she merited, averring through heartbreaks that Mariah had been changing, that she had been moments down from bringing Dominic home, that her love had eventually overpowered her fear, and as that verity spread, public perception shifted, sympathy replacing combination as people realized Mariah had been shot not while running from justice but while trying to face it, a nuance that made her death indeed more unsupportable, because redemption had been so near it was virtually within reach, and yet Ian Ward had stolen it with ruthless perfection, leaving behind a child formerly again ripped from stability, a family shattered beyond form, and a city forced to defy the brutal reality that monsters don't vanish, they stay, and as Genoa City mourned, the question impended heavy and unanswered: where was Dominic now, and what other damage had Ian formerly set in stir, because Mariah's death wasn't the end of the story, it was the morning of a reckoning that would unravel secrets, enkindle revenge, and ensure that Ian Ward's conduct would not remain buried, indeed if he believed the pellet had silenced the verity ever. As Genoa City sank deeper into mourning, the verity of Mariah's final decision began to surface in fractions that made the loss indeed more ruinous, because it came clear that in the hours before her death she had been unraveling her own falsehoods, still preparing to surrender, leaving behind suggestions not to save herself but to save Dominic, and Sharon set up the first crack in the riddle when she stumbled across Mariah's abandoned phone, its battery dead but its contents screaming with implied intent, draft dispatches unsent to Tessa apologizing for everything, notes compartmented and deleted about turning herself in, about bringing Dominic home, about eventually telling the verity no matter the cost, and Sharon's hands shook as she scrolled through them, realizing with crushing certainty that her son had formerly chosen responsibility, that the fear driving her flight had given way to clarity just moments too late, and when the phone records revealed a final call placed to an unknown number traced back to a burner, debitation hardened into rage as all signs refocused back to Ian Ward, the man whose name alone still had the power to chill the blood of everyone who flashed back the wreckage he'd left before, and as the disquisition boosted, Genoa City began to fracture along emotional fault lines, with some still floundering to attune Mariah's crime with her woeful end, while others saw only a woman who had been manipulated, cornered, and also boggled for daring to change her mind, a distinction that signified deeply to Tessa, who stood before anyone who would hear and fiercely defended Mariah's final hours, averring she had been stalwart, averring she had been trying to make effects right, her grief morphing into a fierce, unyielding determination that Mariah would not be flashed back as a villain silenced amid escape but as a broken soul who eventually chose honesty and paid for it with her life, And as Sharon and Nick pushed authorities harder, demanding answers and responsibility, Ian Ward moved through the murk with agitating calm, induced he'd formerly again outplayed everyone, because Dominic was secure, Mariah was gone, and the concession she'd poured out in despair had failed with her, or so he believed, ignorant that the veritably remorse he'd dismissed as weakness had formerly set consequences in stir, because the further Sharon erected together Mariah's last intentions, the further the narrative shifted, and soon whispers turned into certainty that Mariah had been on her way back, that she'd been preparing to face the fallout head-on, and when that verity eventually broke wide open, it burned a disagreement of fury aimed exactly at Ian, with Nick covenanting that this time there would be no escape, no manipulation, no alternate act, because killing Mariah hadn't cancelled the crime, it had amplified it, and as pressure mounted, cracks began to show indeed in Ian's strictly controlled facade, visited by the echo of Mariah's final words, by the look in her eyes when she realized he was going to pull the detector no matter what she said, a look that wasn't fear but ruinous clarity, the kind that lingers, the kind that reminds indeed monsters that power doesn't always equal peace, and while he tried to bury that memory beneath plans and contingencies, Genoa City was closing in, with Faith demanding to know why her family had to die when she was eventually doing the right thing, with Sharon refusing to be silenced by procedure or politics, and with Tessa standing at the center of it all, raw and unbreakable, her grief stropping into a blade as she pledged that Mariah's last attempt at redemption would not be cancelled by the man who stole her future, and when Dominic was eventually set up, alive but shaken, returned under circumstances that raised further questions than relief, the full compass of Ian's brutality came into focus, because Mariah hadn't just been killed, she'd been used, her remorse weaponized to draw her into a trap she couldn't escape. And as the verity gurgled outward, the city reached a collaborative breaking point, realizing that Mariah's death wasn't a woeful accident or the result of bad choices alone, it was a calculated silencing, and prosecution meant to ensure that the story ended on Ian Ward's terms, a plan that unraveled the moment Genoa City refused to let her final hours be rewritten, because in the end, Mariah's remorse didn't vanish with her, it came the spark that exposed Ian, united her family, and converted her death into a reckoning that promised justice would come, no matter how long it took, because while Ian Ward believed the projectile had ended everything, Genoa City knew the verity was louder than any pellet, and Mariah's voice. Commercial dominance made him untouchable. He's about to learn the Newmans still rule this city in ways plutocrat alone can't buy, and speaking of Kane, his triumph continues to unravel as word of Dominic's exposure reaches him, the palm champagne turning to ash as Lily's textbook echoes in his mind, her warning now concentrated with the nipping mindfulness that chaos is spreading far and wide, making him wonder if this is the curse of power he ignored too long, Phyllis brushing off his apprehension as distraction, averring they stay concentrated on consolidating Arabesque's control, but Kane can't shake the sense that commodity far bigger is moving, commodity he wouldn't be suitable to overrun indeed on his precious train. While at the GCAC Billy Abbott watches the news break on his phone, Dominic's face flashing across the screen, guilt eating at him as Jill's voice echoes in his memory prompting him to choose what truly matters, egging Billy to abandon the bar mid-drink, rushing to the sanitarium to see Jill despite everything, realizing too late that life doesn't stay for power plays, as Adam Newman watches it all with calculating eyes, his earlier textbook about Lily and the house now taking on portentous weight, the chessboard filling fleetly with pieces in stir, each move hanging to trip the coming, and as the hunt intensifies Mariah pulls into a desolate rest stop, stepping out into the nipping night air to steady herself, gaping at her reflection in the auto window and slightly fading the woman looking back, sweat warring with conviction as Ian's voice urges her onward, reminding her that vacillation is weakness, that Abby and Devon will no way stop hunting her, but that he has a plan, safe houses, forged documents, a life where she and Dominic can vanish fully, and though Mariah whispers that she doesn't want to hurt anyone, the words ring concave against the reality of what she's formerly done, because back in Genoa City Abby's anguish turns to rage as she vows she'll tear the world piecemeal to get her son back, Devon backing her with unyielding determination, their combined power redoubtable as they begin tracing every connection, every unstable figure who might have motive, until Mariah's name shells like a ghost no bone wants to see, the room falling silent as the recrimination lands, Tessa breaking down fully as she insists Mariah would no way hurt Dominic, indeed as substantiation mounts and Victor's jaw hardens with grim certainty, because he's seen preoccupation destroy families ahead, and he knows how far someone will go when convinced they're right, and as the night stretches on Dominic sleeps on ignorant of the storm his exposure has unleashed, a bitsy life at the center of warring hearts and fractured minds, while Mariah drives again, further from Genoa City, further from the life she knew, induced she's racing toward deliverance indeed as every afar pulls her deeper into darkness, and nearly behind her enchantresses begin to wail, the quest officially afoot, promising that no palm, commercial or particular, will come without ruinous consequences, because in Genoa City secrets no way stay buried, love no way goes untested, and the price of crossing the line is about to be paid in full. The night deepens into commodity colder and further enduring as the quest for Dominic Winters accelerates, the megacity itself acting to hold its breath while alliances shift and buried trueness claw their way to the face, because formerly Mariah Copeland's name is spoken audibly in that tense room at the Chancellor Manse, nothing is the same again, the silence stretching unbearably long as Abby gapes ahead in shock, her mind rejecting the possibility indeed as her heart formerly knows. Devon's face hardening as he begins replaying every odd moment, every instinct he dismissed, while Tessa Porter collapses into heartbreaks, shaking her head over and over, averring this can't be real, that Mariah loved Dominic too important to ever hurt him, her grief tangled with guilt for not seeing the signs sooner, and Victor Newman watches it all with a bloodsucker's focus, formerly assigning people to trace Mariah's movements, pull business cams, clunk cell halls, because this is no longer just about a missing child, it's about stopping a woman who believes she's on a righteous charge, the most dangerous kind of adversary there is, and as police collaboration ramps over, Nikki tries to console Abby only to find herself overwhelmed by recollections of her own children slipping through her fritters at colorful points in her life, knowing too well the terror of a mama who has lost control, while Victoria pushes one's emotion entirely, barking orders, demanding timelines. Determined that no bone escapes Newman reach, not tonight, not ever, and long hauls down Mariah feels the pressure structure indeed without seeing it, her casket tensing every time headlights appear behind her, every time her phone vibrates with cautions she refuses to read, Dominic shifting slightly in his auto seat causing her to blench as she checks him constantly, fear glaring that commodity might be wrong, that she's formerly gone too far to turn back, brooding solace to him as though he can understand, promising she'll cover him from everyone who wants to steal him down, her words echoing Ian Ward's crooked sense as his voice intrudes again, calmer now, cheering her that fear is natural, that mistrustfulness means she cares, and that caring is what makes her good of Dominic, prompting her toward a remote cabin he claims is safe, far off any chart Genoa City would search first, and while Mariah wrestles with the impulse to flee in another direction entirely, the prostration and emotional load make her susceptible, her better judgment dulled by the grim certainty Ian feeds her, because back in Genoa City the Ripple goods are tearing through every corner of power, Kane Ashby arriving back at his suite with Phyllis only to find the Palm High fully gone, news content dominating every screen, Dominic's exposure surpassing commercial captions, and for the first time Phyllis can't spin her way out of the bite crawling up her chine. Kane pacing as lilies before communication renewals in his mind, realizing he's managed to alienate his family while the city descends into madness, making him wonder if Victor's curse is real later each, Phyllis snapping that this has nothing to do with them, averring they concentrate on the deadline she and Kane gave Victor, but Kane hesitates, a rare flicker of mistrustfulness surfacing as he senses Victor's attention shifting from boardrooms to blood, and when Victor Newman decides to concentrate on commodity, nothing stands in his way, not contracts, not courts, not consequences, while over at the sanitarium Billy Abbott eventually reaches Jill's bedside, the sight of her frail and diminished ripping through him as guilt cataracts in full force, their discussion raw and emotional as Jill squeezes his hand and tells him she knows he's fighting for what he thinks is right, but warns him that preoccupation costs further than it ever pays, her words landing hard as news of Dominic pollutants in, Billy realizing how small his Chancellor war suddenly feels, and away Adam Newman still makes his own moves, the earlier textbook about Lily and the house now cutting with the chaos as he calculates influence, knowing information is currency and tonight its value is soaring, while the police eventually confirm what Victor formerly suspected, Mariah's auto spotted on business cams heading out of city, the route erratic, deliberate, designed to shirk Abby's laugh echoing through the room as evidence successes, her knees buckling as Devon catches her, fury kindling through his grief as he swears Mariah wouldn't take his son from him, no matter how far she runs, and Tessa breaks fully, averring she has to be the one to reach Mariah, that she can talk her down, her despair raw as she blames herself for not intermediating sooner, Victor allowing it reluctantly, knowing emotional connection might be their stylish armament, indeed as he orders contingencies in place if words fail, because Ian Ward's involvement becomes clearer by the nanosecond, his cerebral fingerprints unmistakable to those who know his history, Nicky jouncing as his name is spoken, fading the old terror of his manipulations, and as dawn approaches Mariah pulls into the insulated cabin, snow scraping beneath her thrills as she precisely lifts Dominic from the auto, her movements tender and frantic all up formerly, laying him down outside by the fire. And gaping at him in silence, a moment of fragile peace settling as she convinces herself this is the morning of commodity new, a life where no bone dictates her worth or her fatherhood, but the calm shatters when